There is a certain irony to the world's most precise nation relying on forces it cannot control. When I first heard about Japan's new mineral strategy, I thought, of course, they have no choice. But then I felt something colder, a sense of how quietly fragile even the most advanced societies really are. Today I want to discuss why Japan, the world's third largest economy, is shifting its industrial lifeblood away from China. This is not a loud flag-waving decoupling, it's a quiet rebalancing, one that is reshaping the rules for everyone who depends on critical minerals and secure supply chains. We're going to trace three fault lines in this video. Why Japan's technological might rests on geological emptiness, how trust, not just trade, now decide the future of manufacturing, and what Canada and Australia offer that China, for all of its power, simply cannot. Here's a question for anyone watching from Canada, Australia, or anywhere where minerals matter. If your entire industry depended on resources from a single country, how much uncertainty would you tolerate? What is the price of efficiency when the world gets unpredictable? Let me know in the comments below, because real answers are actually rarely as simple as we hope for. Quick personal note, my book, Awake, The Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies, is finally out in the world. This isn't just a guide to thinking more clearly, it's really about finding a sense of clarity and calm in a world that just keeps getting louder. If you ever feel like I do, a bit worn down by all of the noise and knee-jerk opinions, if you want practical ways to think things through properly, especially under pressure, I think you'll find it very valuable. If you prefer to listen instead of read, I've now included a 24-minute companion podcast that walks you through some of the key ideas in depth. You'll find all of the links down below, along with a launch video that explores the bigger themes. There is also a special discount for subscribers as well, so if you're curious, just hit that subscribe button and check it out when you have a moment. And one more tiny thing, maybe you didn't know, but I'm a computer scientist and I have a PhD in the field. I'm working on a new course all about AI fluency, essentially making sense of the technology that's shaping the next decade. If you're interested in this space and want to help guide what I build, I'd love to have your input. There is a very quick 8-question survey, just a couple of minutes to fill out, and your thoughts will directly influence the content that I build next. The link is down below. It would mean so much to hear from you, but now let's dive in. Engineers usually say, you can have the world's best factories, but if your minerals stop, your machines are just monuments. Beautiful, but useless. It's an image that I haven't been able to shake. Millions of precision-engineered parts standing silent for want of a single missing element. Japan has built miracles, honestly. Toyota's perfectionism, Sony's inventiveness, the Shinkansen slicing through the landscape at 300 kilometers an hour, satellites that quietly orbit above us all. This is a country whose industrial reputation borders on myth. Yet underneath it all sits a truth as unglamorous as iron ore. Japan produces almost none of the metals and minerals that make these miracles possible. Its brilliance rests, quite literally, on what arrives by ship. And for decades, the answer was elegant in its simplicity: outsource the risk, import the world's cheapest minerals, and above all, trust that the invisible machinery of global trade would never fail. If you could write a contract and pay your bill, the elements of modern life would just keep flowing. And for years, that trust had a name: China. The logic was unimpeachable. China refined, Japan assembled, the world bought. As long as everyone played their part, the system sank. But efficiency, as I've learned, is a cold master. It asks you to sacrifice redundancy, to cut away slack, and to rely on just one or two arteries. It's thrilling until you realize how little it would take to sever the lifeline. When global politics began to shift, trade wars, sanctions, blockades, you know what all has been happening this year, Japan suddenly found itself watching as if its own future could be held hostage by forces that it could neither predict nor control. The levers weren't in Tokyo's hands, they were in Beijing's. The memory of 2010 still stings: a small maritime dispute, a single diplomatic flare-up, and with almost no warning, China's rare earth shipments simply stopped. Overnight, Japanese factories ran short of the elements that power smartphones, batteries, green energy, and the next generation of cars. There were no substitutes. What had always seemed abstract, a risk noted in a footnote somewhere, now became immediately viscerally real. And to think clearly here, we really have to hold two conflicting ideas at once. Dependence creates efficiency, but it also exposes us to the mood of somebody else's government. This is not just a supply problem, my friends. It becomes a question of sovereignty. How much of your future are you willing to place in somebody else's hands? By the early 2020s, Japan's vulnerability was mathematical almost. Over 80% of its rare earths, graphite, gallium, elements now essential to every advanced sector, flow through Chinese refineries. At some point, the numbers stop being statistics and start to look like a countdown. Japan had to make a choice: double down on the way things are, trusting the old system would recover, or quietly and very carefully start over and rebuild its own foundation before the next storm arrived. Now, Japan's pivot didn't come from anti-China rhetoric or chest-thumping rivalry. It wasn't born in the hills of politics, but in the accumulation of small, sobering facts. The shift began quietly, with policymakers and executives simply watching reality take shape. In Beijing, the signs were clear for those willing to see. China started redirecting its minerals inward, tightening export quotas, steering strategic elements toward its own rising industries, and pouring state-backed investments into sectors that it deemed essential for its future. None of this was shocking. Nations act in their own best interest, of course. Anyone who claims otherwise isn't really paying attention, in my opinion. The surprise was only in how swiftly intentions became policy and policy became a new landscape. For Japan, the lesson was painfully simple, in my opinion. If your supply chain can be disrupted with a single memo, you don't really have a supply chain. You have a wish. All the contracts and decades of goodwill in the world can evaporate in an afternoon if priorities shift in the wrong office. The pandemic only made the lessons sharper, of course. As borders snapped shut and ships idled in harbors, Japan, and really any advanced economy, honestly, watched as the global market revealed itself to be a fragile web of dependencies. What was cheap and reliable yesterday was unavailable or even forbidden today. Russia's invasion of Ukraine underlined the point as well. Energy, semiconductors, agricultural inputs, everything was now subject to geopolitical gravity. The basic assumptions of efficiency and abundance fell apart, one after the other. So Japan realized that it needed something new. Not just efficiency, but resilience, the ability to absorb shocks and keep moving anyway. Not just cheapness, but predictability. Partners who could be counted on regardless of global turbulence. Not just contracts, but real relationships between countries. Alliances where trust lasted longer than a single news cycle, and where the future was planned not quarter by quarter, but decade by decade. It meant searching not just for new mines or new suppliers, but for a new kind of partnership, right? One built on the slow, often unglamorous work of just building trust, the kind that outlives headlines and outlasts storms. And here is the paradox. The best supply chain isn't the fastest or the cheapest. It's the one that endures when the world gets strange. For Japan, two countries fit that bill with almost mathematical neatness: Canada and Australia. Canada offers what no other resource power can: geological wealth, yes, nickel, cobalt, graphite, rare earths, but more importantly, political stability, transparent governance, and a culture of reliability that Japanese firms value as industrial insurance. In Canada, environmental standards aren't just PR, they're actually built into the law. Indigenous partnerships are not afterthoughts, they're actual frameworks for endurance. The logic is very clear. When you supply demands on systems, not just signatures, you actually sleep better. Japanese companies know this. In the last 2 years, Panasonic, Toyota, Mitsubishi all quietly doubled down on Canadian nickel, cobalt, hydrogen, and clean aluminum products. Not because Canada is the cheapest, but because it is the steadiest. When everything else is up for grabs, steadiness becomes priceless. Australia is different, but equally essential. Japan's relationship with Australia is decades old. Iron ore, coal, LNG, and now lithium, rare earths. Without Australia's scale, Japanese industry would simply slow down. Australia brings volume and speed, but also something less obvious: world-class mining know-how. Its engineers and geologists are helping open up Canada's underdeveloped reserves. And in a sense, Australia is the engine and Canada is the anchor. Most of all, both are democracies. In a world where autocracies use resources as leverage, that counts for more than ever. And a good critical thinker here doesn't just ask what's cheap, but who benefits from you depending on them. But let's be clear, Japan isn't choosing sides in some new Cold War. Its supply chain with China isn't vanishing either, it's just being balanced. What's emerging is a triangular architecture. Australia delivers minerals at scale, on time, every year. Canada refines them, policies, ESG standards, keeps the system transparent. Japan binds it all together, the technological demand center that gives both partners reasons to invest. It's not an alliance of flag-waving slogans, but it is an ecosystem, a network of resilience where the failure of one node doesn't sink the whole thing. No autocrat can actually snap their fingers and freeze this one. No single election can blow it apart. And in a world where supply chains are now security chains, this kind of resilience is no longer just an industrial question, it's actually existential. If you're finding this useful, do consider subscribing. The House of L is a community of thoughtful, curious people, and you're always so welcome here. So what does this shift mean really beneath the surface announcement and new contracts? For Japan, it's the possibility of building cars, chips, and batteries without always glancing nervously over his shoulder, wondering if the new diplomatic chill will freeze its assembly lines. It's the confidence that comes from securing the right minerals sourced from partners who treat contractors not as bargaining chips but as promises. In practical terms, it means Japanese industry can innovate, invest, and expand with the knowledge that its lifeblood won't suddenly be cut off by somebody else's political mood. For Canada, it's an invitation to rise above its historic role as merely a hewer of wood and drawer of water. For generations, Canada's relationship with the world was extractive: dig, ship, repeat. Now, by coordinating democratic mineral networks and investing in downstream processing, Canada actually steps onto a new stage as a trusted organizer, a standard setter, and a bridge between resource wealth and technological futures. This is an opportunity to shape how the world thinks about mineral security, not just to supply it. For Australia, it's the chance to be seen as more than just a quarry at the world's edge. By deepening its ties with both Japan and Canada, Australia actually becomes a co-architect of the new industrial order, a partner shaping the rules, not simply feeding the system. Its expertise in extraction, logistics, and mineral discovery becomes a strategic asset, opening doors to new ventures, higher value-added industries, and a larger voice in regional security conversations. And for everyone else, all of us basically, this new supply chain is a quiet, stubborn rebuke to the old orthodoxy that globalization is just a matter of finding the cheapest option and hoping for the best. In a world that's increasingly turbulent like ours, sometimes resilience, actual lived resilience, is worth far more than a small discount, don't you think? It's a reminder that real security doesn't come from cutting costs to the bone, but from building relationships that can withstand the pressure when the world stops behaving as planned. The quiet anxiety behind all of this is not just Japan's, it's everyone's. We all want to believe our systems are more robust than they actually are, but in reality, the stronger our ambitions, the more fragile our foundations often become. I asked at the start, how much uncertainty would you tolerate? Maybe the answer is less than we used to. Maybe in a world where cheap can vanish overnight, the most advanced societies may just find themselves praying for the simple, old-fashioned virtue of trust. A supply chain is not just a map of factories, my friends. It's a map of whom you trust when the world gets strange. If you want to explore how Australia chose Canada over the United States, the next video is the series that goes even deeper. The link for that is below, and for more on how mineral networks are rewiring global order, there is a separate video for that one as well. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, if you want to understand how to navigate the noise, the hype, and the complexity of our current moment, I think you'd really enjoy my book. It's called Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies. And it's written for people who want to stay grounded, think clearly, and live in reality, even when the world makes that definitely feel impossible. I've also now included a 24-minute companion podcast episode where we unpack some of the ideas behind Awake in a much more relaxed conversational way. Perfect if you prefer to listen while walking, driving, or just taking a break from screens. You'll find the links to everything down below. I'd love to know what you think of it. Thank you so much for being here, for your curiosity, and for holding on to the kind of clear thinking that in the end is the rarest mineral of all, right? If you like this conversation, do consider subscribing for more, and don't forget to check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive.